We've seen it on our streets. We really have. And we know that a certain proportion of Muslim people are radicalised, quite a high proportion. You don't need too many to make the world a very difficult place. I mean, when you've got a serious religious leader in this city after October the 7th, proclaiming that tears of joy are streaming down my face and chanting crowds in front of the Opera House, decrying Israel, before Israel has done anything.
Right, that was
in the
literally
face
the
of
next
the
day, right?
utter bestiality of what Hamas did, you have to wonder about the moral compass of those people. And you have to wonder about the people who either are with them or are not discerning enough to see how dangerous that mindset, if you like, that morality, even that spirituality actually is.
Talk to me a little bit more about what's going on in this country now, because I don't think my audience knows too much about it. It's rare that I cover Australian politics. It's just, if I happen to be home right now and your current prime minister was there, I'd probably do a story or two, but we don't talk about it that often. I just came from Melbourne, and it was very hard to get a feeling for the city. There was no feeling. My entire team, we felt this. We went out several nights. We were out and about. You couldn't figure out who the population was. You couldn't get a sense. Often we were kind of joking, where are the Australians? It just didn't seem like the Australians were there. There was a general sense of, well, it kind of felt like an American blue city. There wasn't a lot of homeless, I'll say that. But there was
a lot more than there was, though.
And I said that to a few people who said that exact thing to me. Then there's this crazy stuff with the machete attacks and a bunch of other things. But what is happening to the identity of Australians, and how different is the experiment that I just saw in that city different than maybe the country as a whole?
It's a very good question. Like you, we're a federation. We were states before we were a nation. Different process to federalism than you, but and we're not invested in the history of it. That's the interesting thing, because there's no bloodshed. It was just done through persuasion and wisdom and a sense that the time had come. So Americans will all know who their founding fathers are. They'll be able to quote quite a few of them.
Not all of us, but...
Well, a lot more than would know here. Yeah. Very few Australians would know who Deakin and Barton and Parkes and the framers of our Constitution. They wouldn't know who they were. And as Thomas Sowell's warned, if you forget these things, you can guarantee that you will lose them over time. And that's the great problem. I guess there's always been a great rivalry between our two greatest cities, which are Sydney and Melbourne. And I remember somebody saying to me when I was a kid, Melbourne is so English and Sydney's so American. And that's true, I think. But for some reason, Melbourne over recent decades has become more liberal in the American sense, more left-wing. Sydney's probably the home now of conservatism as well as liberalism. The two vie for position. Sydney and Melbourne have always been great rivals, but New South Wales, I guess, dominated by Sydney. Better economic management. It's in much better shape. Law and order hasn't broken down as much. The march of the left through the institutions, so-called, has not been quite as profound. So they're quite different. I found myself on Patrick Bet-David's program in Miami, where you now live, and 2 hours. And I was surprised, always up for the challenge, but the topic was, whatever happened to the Australians? I'm very aware, unless you want to tell me otherwise, that Americans, in as much as they think about Australia, think, they're our best friends. We really care about them. We like them. We identify
there's
with them.
only a positive connotation. If you say something about Australia, there's no American that's like, oh, I hate Australia or I hate Australians. It's only a positive connotation with, I would say, a little bit of, well, we just don't think about them that much. That's kind of what it's become. That's why I like coming here. I like learning about what's going on. And that's why I'm curious, because what I saw in Melbourne was, it didn't strike me that I was in Australia. I could have been anywhere, and that seemed strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the foreign-born component of the American citizenry is around 15%. Britain's the same, 31% here, and another 20% who have one or both parents born overseas.
So how long can that hold? How long can that hold
Well, this is
give you a Australia that you would be happy
Kissin has done a brilliant piece on this called An Explainer, I think that's what he calls it, where he talks about if you have many people coming in, if they're prepared to merge and build up, it can be fine. Everything goes well. There's probably a limit to how much you can absorb at any given time, even with the best will in the world. But if people are coming in bringing their own beliefs, their own politics, their own approach to life that is actually hostile to the host's underlying foundations, you can run into problems. So I'm profoundly worried by the implications of the importations of ancient hatreds from other parts of the world into our two biggest cities and beyond in recent times.
So why have they been let in? I mean, this is the great question of everyone in the West. Why have these people been let in? Was this a mistake? Was this a misguided economic reasoning? Or was it something more nefarious?
I think it all stems from the complacency around our own blessings, if I can put it that way, a lack of understanding of how hard won the institutions of freedom actually were and how they need constant nurturing and constant attention to being rained on them, and how, in the words of our longest-serving Prime Minister, democracy is actually not a machine. Authoritarian regimes, dictatorships, dysfunctional states, they can be machines. They churn through people like they're just so much mincemeat. But democracies are not machines. They're meant to be, if you like, spirits, as he put it. It's more of a spirit than it is a machine, in which we recognise that no matter people's differences or station in life, all souls are equal in the eyes of heaven. You've got a rationale for saying that everyone has worth and dignity. That, ironically, is not the value system of some of the people that have been moving into the West in recent times, looking for the advantages, the material advantages of the West, but not looking for that recognition that we all have to respect our neighbour as much as ourselves, the golden rule, if you like.
So how much of this is really about radical Islam? Because obviously you've said you're talking about this in a broad sense, but you're not really talking about the people from Asia who've moved here, right? I mean, they seem to be integrating, or at least they don't seem to be at odds with the Australian system. Maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there is a different version of this that seems to be coming in attached with Islam.
Well, we've seen it on our streets. We really have, and we know that a certain proportion of Muslim people are radicalised, quite a high proportion. You don't need too many to make the world a very difficult place. I mean, when you've got a serious religious leader in this city after October the 7th proclaiming that tears of joy are streaming down my face and chanting crowds in front of the Opera House, decrying Israel, before Israel has done anything.
Right, that was
in the
literally
face
the
of the
next day, right?
utter bestiality of what Hamas did, you have to wonder about the moral compass of those people. And you have to wonder about the people who either are with them or are not discerning enough to see how dangerous that mindset, if you like, that morality, even that spirituality actually is.
So then the hardest question I can possibly ask you, what do you do? What
Well,
do you do as a nation
leadership.
that doesn't want to commit suicide?
You have to exercise leadership. And to exercise leadership, you have to, this is Thomas Sowell's point, you've got to understand how we got what we've got. It didn't fall out of the skies. Our forebears, this was not a great place as a convict settlement. Who would have thought it would have grown into one of the greatest democratic achievements of all times? You'll never know it because our children, I know this, I learnt this the other day from a parent. Our children are taught in schools that Indigenous people, Indigenous Australians, who have often had terrible treatment. That is true. Mm. But at law, they were always British citizens. And yet in our schools, they're being taught they were considered literally as objects under the Flora and Fauna Act of, they never say New South Wales or Australia, just the Act. Mm-hmm. No such Act ever existed. You can fact check it with the ABC. The ABC's fact checked it. There was no such act. In fact, although they didn't often take advantage of it, Indigenous men in this city where we are now, in this state, were given the right to vote while America still kept slaves. Some of our achievements are quite astonishing in terms of being an open, liberal, prosperous society. And here's the rub. I recently heard the other day firsthand of a Vietnamese man who came here with his family, his 2 children. And he was so delighted. He wanted to be part of this country. And he said to his kids, "No, you study hard at school. You be builders." Go back to David Brooks. Tend the garden, prune the trees, cultivate the soil. This is a wonderful country we've come to. His kids come home and start saying, "Dad, this is a terrible country. This is an illegitimate country. All we've done is dark deeds." Of course we've done dark deeds. We're human. You've done the wrong thing occasionally, I dare say. I've certainly done the wrong thing occasionally. None of us are perfect. So you've got to form balanced judgments.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.